This week's podcast is sponsored by Marantz, who've been delivering advanced home audio innovations since 1953. Marantz audio products have been designed to reproduce music as it was meant to be heard, because music matters. Find out more about what makes Marantz so special at marantzmoments.com. Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast for Monday the 7th of October, and joining me on this edition, Kaz Harlow.
Where are they?
Steve Withers.
If you're good at something, never do it for free.
And Ed Selly.
I'm not a monster, I'm just ahead of the curve.
Welcome back to the podcast. We've got another special guest this evening on the podcast. It was pre-recorded because Steve wasn't supposed to be here this week. So it would have sounded a little bit strange because Steve's in
If I hadn't been.
If you hadn't been, because Steve's in the interview. But anyway, the interview is coming up in the hardware section. It's with Nanosys CEO and President Jason Hartlove. It's talking about quantum dots, and there's some really, really interesting stuff in there. If you've got any interest in TV and the future of TV, stay around for that. But before that, what's everybody been up to, Kaz?
You always have to come to me, don't you?
Well, at some point he was going to come to you.
Yeah, I know, but I normally have a bit more time to pick up on what everyone else has been doing and figure out whether I can make
and lie, make something up.
Which is ironic because I end up just telling the truth, but not a great deal. Working solidly and then reviewing solidly. I'm not really sure there's much room for anything else involving anything.
You've certainly kept your quota of crap up, I have to say, in terms of what you've had to sit through.
Well, the problem is this.
Nobody tells him to do this, by the way, Steve. He just
volunteers. I'm not saying you make him do this. It's some sort of self-inflicted injury. But
I had a lot of discs which would have been divvied up between me and Simon that landed by the PR company on Saturday. And there was little choice between getting them over to him sometime this week or just getting them in for release dates. So I appreciate...
You're dedicated, Kaz. That's
yeah, I think it's just fanatical loyalty.
Yeah, absolutely.
I understand the disc reviews. Did no one made you watch In the Tall Grass, which I've never heard of?
Oh, come on. The guy who did Cube did a Netflix film. I mean,
everyone's doing it. I've got a Netflix film coming out next week, so it's
10 out of 10 would watch.
I'll review it, but I'm pretty sure it was the same.
Edward Wood.
Quite enjoying The Shadow of the Moon, though. So,
but to a certain extent, I think I have to. I review these films because I have no idea what it's going to be like. I haven't even seen the trailer. I have no idea. I expect a lot of people are like that. They turn up and there's like, oh, there's another film on Netflix. So I'm trying to filter a little bit
to my list and then forget about them.
What I tend to do is load up the Netflix page, flicker through a few things, and kind of make my mind up, and then go and do something else.
Yeah. That's when I turn the music on. But however it works for you.
But I would have, if I hadn't written this review for people to try and keep their expectations down. I personally thought a Netflix film by the guy who did Cube could work out quite well, with a Stephen King short story behind it. And I think I was a bit disappointed that it really was a short story and the rest
Really? You were disappointed? Like, if it actually had worked, it wouldn't be on Netflix.
Do you have the mind of a goldfish? The brain of a goldfish?
Oh, come on. They've got The Irishman coming up. Come on.
Yeah, for every Irishman, there's 10,
Scotsman.
I was trying to think of that Clover paradox. That's what I was trying to think of.
Cloverfield paradox.
Cloverfield paradox. Thank you.
Clover paradox.
I was thinking Irishman again.
All right. Okay. Well, keep up the good work, Kaz. That's all.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed X-Men Dark Phoenix. That was absolutely rubbish.
Right, what have you been doing, Steve?
School. What have I been doing? I was in Spain, which is why I wasn't on last week's podcast. And unbeknownst to me, 2 weeks before I went to visit my parents, they had massive flooding, which didn't make the news much in this end of over here. But it all dried up by the time I got there. Unfortunately, it also meant that all the mosquitoes had laid their eggs, so I got eaten alive, basically. And it was really hot. It was like 30 degrees. Couldn't get sleep at night. I couldn't live there. I was so glad to get back to cold, wet England. It was nice.
I'd pay for you to do a travel program. I don't like it.
That's a Netflix
Too hot.
It was okay during the day, but I can't sleep at night when it's
God,
too
I
hot.
could see it now. An irritant abroad. It would be fantastic.
It'd be a bit
Right,
like
if you are in the business of funding television programs, just get in touch and we'll get the pitch together.
Steve Coogan could get a replacement in for
for the
some
trip.
kind of for the trip. Except it'll be I went to Spain. It was too hot, and the mosquitoes had laid their eggs. And
No,
it
wasn't
just-
it? Yeah, the mosquitoes hatched, and then we're eating. I came back with about 50 bites. Outrageous. Even though I'd sprayed myself with mosquito repellent, it had no effect whatsoever.
No,
Just get
tends
absolutely
to-
hammered. I find I don't get bitten once my blood alcohol level's above borderline hospitalisation. I don't know if that works for everyone, but it seems to work for me.
Anyway, I was quite glad to get back to England in the end.
Okay, good stuff.
And I've watched rugby. That's not what I've mostly been doing. A lot of rugby.
The rugby. Okay. Is this, what is it, Six Nations or something, is it?
World Cup, mate.
The what?
World Cup.
Oh, they have one of them, do they?
Yeah, it's in Japan.
Yeah, all right.
I think you'll find that England's the only nation in the world to have won the World Cup at cricket, football, and rugby.
It's quite niche, in fairness.
Yeah, well, certainly just two of them are. Outside of the Commonwealth, no one gives a monkeys about the other two. It's only the football one that really counts.
Yes. That's
Right.
the only one that's actually a World Cup, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ed, what you been up to?
Bed shopping. I went and bought some beds today for the new house because now I know when I'm going to actually have access to the house. I thought, right, well, actually, these things have got a lead time, haven't they? So went off, bought some beds.
See, that would have been easy to top. I could have come up with anything that could have topped bed shopping.
I don't know. People seem to make a great song and dance about bed shopping.
Did
and I
you,
think they were...
Did you just buy the mattress and a base, or did you actually buy a headboard or whatever that you could put straps to?
I have bought a big king-size wooden frame. It's got a headboard built in, but critically it doesn't have anything at the bottom because I don't like anything interfering with my feet. And I
Unless you're paying for it.
I ordered a mattress. And there's like, do you care about this? It's like, so I just pressed it and sat on it and this is fine. I think they were just taken aback by the fact that I chose a bed in about 4 minutes because it's in stock and it
That's
can be
because you were a
delivered.
bloke and you were on your own.
Yeah.
Could be delivered at the
That's
time,
how I shop.
the time and place of my choosing. And then having successfully bought myself a bed, I then went and bought my son a bed and he was equally nonplussed by it. It's like, well, it's bed shaped. I go, look, this one also turns into a double bed in case people, I don't care. So no, we did nihilist bed shopping. That went very well. I mean, it's one of those things. It's annoying, isn't it? Because it's across 2 beds. I spent £1,291, which is, that's money I could have spent on something with a plug. But obviously, beds I concede are quite handy. So I've grudgingly got.
Have you got a couch? I tend to find a couch works as a bed as well.
No, I've already got those. I mean, it's all a bit hit and miss. This isn't like me stocking a first house because this isn't my first house. I've got quite a lot of furniture. What I didn't have was any beds. So I thought those are quite handy. So I've gone and sorted those. Got delivery dates all plumbed in. That's all sorted. So yeah, that's been the major thing. I've been working. I've been experimenting with posh soup. Otherwise it's just autumn drudge work at the moment, not grudge
You
work.
mentioned-
That's slightly different.
I've been getting into the soups again. Obviously, the weather's turned now, so it's
It's soup weather. This is the
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
Is there anything more satisfying than making a big sod off vat of soup? I don't think there is actually, in a culinary sense. So, I mean, admittedly, I went a bit over. I mean, you can tell that there's a master chef on telly at the moment because normally I'm pretty smug to say that if I make it in a reasonable quantity, it works out as costing between 50 and 60p a bowl. I went a bit overboard this time. I think it works out as about £1.65 a bowl. So
yeah, but you
it's
fried some truffles though, didn't you?
It just truffle oil.
Right.
But no, I had fresh chanterelle and dried porcini, and yeah, it all tallies up as it ends up being quite expensive. But I made cream of chicken and mushroom using quite a posh chicken, which admittedly was reduced for quick sale, and some very posh mushrooms, and it's absolutely fantastic.
What the hell's a posh chicken?
Free range organic.
All right. Okay.
It would have been a £9 chicken, but mercifully it was reduced to a more palatable £4.50, which is still quite a lot for
Thought you
small
meant
chicken.
it was £9 in weight.
That's a different sort of. So that's man versus soup.
Phantom.
No, I thoroughly enjoy. As I say, most of my cooking skills are much better suited to cold weather anyway. So that's all good.
I'm not as pretentious as that. I see what's in the fridge, vegetable wise, chop it up, bung it in a pan with some stock, and then after 25 minutes, I mash it, and that's my soup done.
Well, no, that's fair enough. That's most of the time. That's what I did. But for whatever reason, I was seized by a burning desire to make cream and chicken and mushroom, and I just went overboard on it. But it's on my Instagram if you want to see it. It looks pretty smart. I'm not going to lie. So, all good.
I'm literally sitting in amongst TVs at the moment. No word of a lie. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 TVs here.
Is it like a really shit version of The Architect in The Matrix Reloaded?
Yes, absolutely.
Sounds like the end of The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah, because what I'm trying to do at the minute, because I've got this professional monitor in the Sony, and I've got a few OLEDs. I'm trying to get them all next to that, so I can sit and do some comparison stuff. Then video that. So I've got them for the video reviews. Then swap the TVs around, and at the minute I've got so many TVs that it's just getting them around and measuring them and doing it's a nightmare.
And at some point, dear listener, Phil might talk about them on the podcast.
Well, I'll do it next week when you're not here, Steve.
Yeah.
Fill some time in. Yeah, Ed can question me on TVs.
Lucky boy.
Dude, don't forget to send me the questions. Otherwise, it will be a question.
Put your questions in the feedback thread for this podcast, and then Ed will put them to Phil next week.
Yeah, and it's been so wet here that I basically haven't left the house very often, to be honest. I went to the cinema, and like you, Ed, if I need something at the shop, I just tend to add 10 minutes onto the trip to the cinema at the Metro Centre, go pick up what I need, and then go and see my film. None of this going from shop to shop to shop to shop just to go back to the first shop again and get the item that I should have got first time. I know what I'm going for. Go get it.
Oh no, unfortunately, when it comes to shopping for food, I can't do that. Food and music, I suffer the agonies of the damned. It's like, do I want product A or almost identical product B? And things like that. But when it comes to things that other people apparently spend significant amount of time on, like, beds, it's like, well, it's bed-shaped. I quite like the colour. We're good. Fine. Fantastic.
Okay. So other than work, I've not been doing.
I
much.
drove my car into a bollard after nearly 3 years of having absolutely no paint damage on it whatsoever. I drove it into a bollard.
Have you been to the quick chips away repair place to get?
It's more than the chips away. It's down to the plastic on the.
No.
I will get it. It's all in hand. One of the things that I have learned over the last 18 months is that none of these things are actually world ending. So I've just shrugged. Went and had a cup of coffee, and I'll get it sorted. I mean, obviously the wheels. I mean, I suspect the offside rear. I don't think that's actually something that a wheel repair thing is going to.
It's still round.
Be able to sort. It's still round, but it's bollocks. So I suspect that I'm just going to have to choose from one of the many people who have rolled their Fiesta and just buy some of their wheels on eBay. So that's fine. But again. I'm not letting it get to me. I'll sort it when the lease is done.
I'm assuming these days, Ed, going to have a cup of coffee is a euphemism, isn't it?
Shut up.
That's what I was asking about the headboard.
Very in joke.
Right, I think we better get strapping and crack on with.
Tied us up long enough on this rubbish.
Yeah, competitions. Kaz, tell us all about them.
Right, we've got copy
some enthusiasm, Kaz.
Always feeling.
Okay. Well, we're doing quite well. We've got a bunch of 4K titles. I think the most we've ever had in competitions. We've got Stallone's Lockup on 4K. That closes 14th of October. Rocketman on 4K closes 15th of October. And Godzilla on 4K. Godzilla King of Monsters on 4K.
You should have prefaced that with we've got 4K Blu-rays, but they're not particularly good.
No, it's one step at a time. Okay. At the very least, we don't have anything on DVD as a prize at the moment. So
no, not at the moment.
We're firmly heading in the right direction.
Rocket Man's a good film. I enjoyed Rocket Man.
All right, okay.
And Godzilla is
Godzilla's awful.
Good,
Yes.
good. It's bloody
Like
awful.
being hit over the head with a
possibly
boxing
one of the
glove for 2
best
hours.
demo discs.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, if you want to test your subs,
Well,
that's the
plenty
thing
of
to do.
people do buy these things just. For,
Yeah, I got it. I bought it.
Well,
But
there you
that's I bought it to test subs with because it's got massive amounts of bass
Right. So
from like the very first credit.
so it doesn't really matter the quality of the film here. If you're
Yeah,
interested
film's
in
awful.
demo, then
If you want a free demo disc, enter this competition.
Unless you're one of those weird people who really likes Godzilla films, I just find them boring as hell. Who cares about two monsters kicking crap out of each other?
actually, I wouldn't have
I'm
minded
sorry, what?
if it had been about two monsters kicking the crap out of each other. The problem was it wasn't. It tried to be about a whole bunch of other things.
Oh yeah, because it has to
And
be. No one
monsters.
really wants to see two monsters kicking crap at each other for 2 hours. That's just mind-numbing. The reason that
It
Pacific
was-
Rim's good is because it's
As a
got
man who is now a
years
fanatical fan of the Fast and Furious franchise.
Hey, that's about family.
They could have Pacific Rimmed it, but
Is that a euphemism?
they could have Pacific Rimmed it, and it would have been good. All right,
A good rim
But-
job,
Better
eh?
still,
Yeah.
just watch Pacific Rim.
sure, but they had too much in the way of plot. There was too much contrivance. There was
At least on
too much
disc.
plotting on whatever. At
At
least
least
on
on-
disc, it's easier to watch. isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, you can fast forward it.
Turn it off.
Yep, done it off
It's
fast forward.
really badly edited as well. Like it's ludicrous that it jumps around that much.
Yeah, I think I was half asleep when I saw it at the cinema because I didn't hate it when I came out of the cinema, but no, I've certainly changed my.
Because it was so loud that it was giving me a headache.
yeah.
Anyway, I'll tell you what. A quick diversion here. Has anyone seen Battle at Big Rock?
No.
The Jurassic World short that's online.
No.
If you've not seen it, check it out. Watch it on YouTube. If that's an indicator of what we can expect with the next Jurassic World film, I'm up for it. It's really good.
Okay.
It's a little aside.
Yeah,
What we're talking
let's do the competition. We can talk about because there's a Star Trek trailer, Picard trailer, and stuff that we need to talk
Yeah.
about anyway later on. So Kaz, back to that's the 4K Blu-rays. There's 1 out of 3 or 4 that's decent.
There's also
Fingers
The Stand
crossed,
on
boys.
Blu-ray that closes 18th of October. 3 films with Sammo Hung that closes 23rd of October. You can win a Yamaha Musicast Bar 400 worth £649. That closes 31st of October. And a World of Warships starter pack worth £15. That an unlimited number to be won. Enter and you basically win. I'm just reminding everyone. Enter and you basically win. That closes 31st of October. Yeah, it's worldwide.
Is that not normally the case?
Because it's the world of warships, Steve.
Oh, well,
Not,
that would
not
be.
the, not...
The
I
clue
don't
was in
know.
the title. You're right. Yeah, I didn't think that was
All competitions open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK or
Except-
worldwide for the last competition.
For the last one.
There are no previous competition members. Well, there are, but we're not going to tell you who they are. And that's that.
Okay, thanks for that, Kaz. And like I say, the next section is hardware, and it's our interview with Jason Hartliff. Okay, moving on to the hardware section of this week's podcast, and we have yet again another special guest joining us this week. Let me introduce you to the president and CEO of Nanosys, Jason Hartliff. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Thank you, Phil. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Now, we will get into quantum dots and what they mean, and I know that our audience are really keen to find out more about that, but I think to start off, maybe you could give us a little bit about your background, when you joined the company and so on.
Sure. My name's Jason Hartlove. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I've done many different things in my career, but always related to photonics and optics. So I've worked in fiber optics. I actually am the inventor of the sensor that's used in the optical mouse. I worked in CMOS image sensors, and most recently joined the display business and application area when I joined Nanosys in 2008. And since that time, we've been focused at Nanosys on bringing quantum dot technology from the lab into commercial products. And that's our mission here.
So how long has the company been going? How long have you been working on this technology, and when did it first come to market?
So, the origins of quantum dots go back quite a long ways, actually. And some of the earliest uses of the quantum confinement effect, which are as fundamental in terms of how these materials work and their quantum mechanics, was discovered even in the 1950s. But it wasn't until the 1990s that a couple of people working on these materials with Lou Bruce, who was at the time at Bell Labs, really figured out ways in which these materials could be made very high efficiency in terms of their production of light, which is critical to use them in any kind of commercial applications. And that was Munjib Wendy, who currently is at MIT, and Paul Alivisatos, who's currently at UC Berkeley. Those two gentlemen, together with some others, actually were the original scientific founders of Nanosys in 2001. And their technology and their developments that they had worked on in the 90s were exclusively licensed into the company. The company worked, effectively then since 2001 on this technology. I joined the company in 2008, and we brought our first product to market in 2013, and that was an optical film impregnated with quantum dots, and that was used in the Kindle Fire HDX. That was the first product that we had come out into the market. And since that time, many, many more products, actually over 100 product level SKUs in the market this year using quantum dots from Nanosys. And every year we see that number grow.
So just in layman's terms, for some of those that haven't followed the story so far, what is a quantum dot?
Quantum dots are tiny semiconductor particles, which we make synthetically using what's called colloidal chemistry. And because these semiconductor particles are so small, they actually have different optical and electronic properties than larger particles would have made from the same semiconductor materials. So one of the key effects that we're able to make use of is what's called quantum confinement. And quantum confinement, which is, basically from whence quantum dots get their name, is basically a property whereby the energy of the excited state in the particle. So if we excite one of these particles by injecting charge into it, and we can do that in a number of ways. We can inject energy into the particle by striking the particle with a photon, for example, and that's a photoluminescent type of a mode of operation. When the particle becomes energized, the amount of energy that's in the particle is very nearly exactly the amount of energy that was imparted to the particle originally. But when that energy recombines when the exciton recombines and an emitted photon is thrown off from the particle, the energy of that photon that comes off is basically going to be lower than the energy that it was excited at. And that's because this quantum confinement basically limits the amount of energy that can be contained in the exciton as it recombines. So by varying the size of these particles, we can basically bleed off or downconvert more of the energy that comes into the particle to lower energy levels or lower energy states when there's a re-emission event from these crystals. For example, with a small quantum dot, if we excite that with a blue photon, which has a lot of energy, then the downconverted energy state will be coming out at a lower energy than the blue photon. And in this case, for example, it'll be a green light that will be emitted from the quantum dot. A larger particle will bleed off even more energy or downconvert more, and then we will have the blue photon exciting that quantum dot, and we will have a red photon come off. So these can be thought of as basically little downconverters for energy sources. And again, as I said, we can excite them by injecting charge directly into them, such as by forcing electrons and holes into the particles, or we can excite them by stimulating them with something like a photon. And so these are very unique properties, because now what we're able to do is emit light based on the size of the particle at any given wavelength that we choose to emit light at. So in other words, by varying the size of the particle during the synthetic process, we can force the particle to emit light at any wavelength in the visible spectrum. So this is really, really interesting, because there are very few semiconductor materials that will emit at the different wavelengths of light that we really want to have, our light sources at. And in particular, there's really no good semiconductor material that emits throughout the green region with high efficiency. This is the so-called green gap of LEDs. So what quantum dots are able to do is basically take blue light energy emitted from a blue LED, convert that into perfect green light energy with very high efficiency, like 99% external quantum efficiency, and emit that perfect green light exactly at the wavelength that the application demands. So that's a long explanation, but they're really complex little devices, and I could go on about them for a really long time. They're very, very small. When I talk about quantum confinement, the quantum dots are basically in the 2 to 6 nanometer range. 1/10,000th or 100,000th the size of a human hair, for example. And again, synthetically made by colloidal chemistry.
It's fascinating technology.
Listening to you speaking then, Jason, I was just thinking of the scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp where Ant-Man goes, "Are you guys just putting the word quantum in front of everything?" You talk about passing photons of light through the quantum dot in order to, say, turn a blue photon into green, which I assume is essentially what's being done with, say, a Samsung quantum dot LED TV, where they're using the LED backlight, or the LED itself is coated in quantum dots, and that's how they're using it. But does that also mean you could put energy into it and create a self-emissive quantum dot?
That's
LED?
Exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the new generation of technology that we're working on developing. And so leveraging a lot off of some of the other development work that's been done in OLED, we can build a very similar structure to an OLED structure, where we have a whole injection and whole transport layer, a very thin film of material that is rich in holes, and then we can put a layer of our quantum dots on top of that, and then we can put a very thin layer of an electron-rich material on top of the layer of quantum dots. And by applying a voltage across this little stack of thin films, we can basically force holes and electrons into the quantum dot layer, and they will in turn emit light. We've demonstrated this publicly at a number of recent conferences. At the Quantum Dot Forum down in San Diego earlier this year, I actually had a printed flexible display, which was my business card, as an example. And so this little piece of plastic that basically lit up, which had my company name and my name on it. So this type of thing is definitely going to come in the future. The efficiencies of quantum dot based electroluminescent devices are getting better and better, and now are nearing the efficiency of OLED devices. And the lifetime still remains a little bit behind where it needs to be in order for these to become commercial products. But I think those gaps are closing quickly, and probably in the next 3 to 5 years, the lifetime gaps will be closed, and you'll start to see products come to market with a self-emissive or electro-emissive characteristic, not just what today we call the photoluminescent or phosphor type application, as you said, which is used in Samsung TVs and many others such as Vizio, Hisense, and etc.
That sounds like the perfect future. And I guess some of the major points that that we should look at with Quantum Dot on OLED is that you're talking about RGB, pure RGB, which has been a major issue up to now with the likes of the OLED TVs that are on the market. If people are not aware, they actually use a white pixel in there as well as RGB. But you're actually talking about a pure RGB color because you're using the Quantum Dot.
Yeah, that's right. And so, as you guys are well aware, all of our standards and all of our video today is basically rendered in 3-color space. And so red, green, and blue are the primary colors that we use to make up the entire palette of all the colors that are seen in a display. And so the more pure the quality of those primary emission colors is, the better the overall quality of the display is going to be. In other words, you can think of it as if I have to make, every in-between color from the red, green, and blue that I have, if the red that I have is kind of orangish, then not only do I not have a pure looking red on my display, but anytime I use red to mix with, let's say blue to create a violet color, that color also is going to be a little bit off. And so, what we really would love to have in displays is very narrow primaries. And in fact, the new color standards, which is called Rec 2020, and that is the color standard for 4K UHD, which was developed out of NHK in Japan, that actually calls for the use of laser, which are very, very narrow primaries, in order to create the color. And, if you go to one of these Barco laser-powered projector cinemas, you can see just how amazing these color experiences are. Of course, that technology is far beyond what we can put in the home today, but quantum dots are absolutely a huge step towards that in terms of creating these pure red, green, and blue primaries in the display, much better than any other technology that's out there for creating those pure red, green, and blues. Better than OLEDs, better than conventional LEDs, and so forth.
Now, we're obviously talking about some distance in the future there. I know a lot of our listeners are going to be really excited with this technology as we are. But emissive quantum dots, you're saying 3 to 5 years away before the lifespan is there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's right. And then, there may be some additional gap or some additional, hurdles for commercialization. There always are, as people may need to reconfigure their manufacturing lines and things of that nature.
Let's go from the future and rewind a little bit back to where we are at this moment in time. So with the use of quantum dots, where exactly are we when we're talking about TV displays? Where is the growth area going to be over the next 3 to 5 years in that sector, do you think?
Yeah, so I think that there's 2 implementations that we have. One which is in the market today, which we've referred to as photoluminescent. And that is, as you noted earlier, the use of a sheet or a film impregnated with quantum dots that's stimulated by a blue backlight. And now you've got this perfect red, green, blue backlight spectrum. That's going to go into your LCD, and from there forward, the LCD is going to treat that white light, which is made up of this pure red, green, blue, the same way as it does a normal backlight, which is made up of a lot more, other colors such as yellows and oranges. The difference is in the color reproduction now, and in also the efficiency, is that all of the green light energy that needs to come out at the green subpixel is all green. And so we're not having to filter out at that subpixel level a whole bunch of this other light energies such as yellows or turquoise. So we get a pure green primary, we get a pure red primary, pure blue primary, but it's still basically an LCD system. And so, LCD systems are fantastic. Obviously, they're the number one, shipping display type in the world. But one of the, recent issues that has been brought to light as OLED technology has come up is that, LCDs basically do not have a pure black. And so this is because the backlight unit remains on for the most part, even when the pixel at a given location is turned off. And so you've got this sort of, I like to think of it as, you've basically put shutters or blinds on a window, and the light is coming from the backside regardless. If you want that pixel on, you open the blinds and the light comes forward. But when you close the blinds, it's not completely black. You don't have blackout shades there, right? And so that's an LCD architecture. Now, what people have tried to do, and it's largely effective, is they've gone to systems in the backlight where they go from having one big uniform backlight that's either on or off to making basically regions of the backlight that can be controlled and turned on or off independently, depending upon the scene content. And so this is so-called local dimming. And when you build up an array of these zones in the backlight, you can have your drapes there to open and close, of course, still. But if you want to turn off the backlighting for an entire number of windows, you can actually shut that off while leaving the backlight on for the rest of the building. And so this helps improve the black level because now there's no light to come through even the shuttered or the closed drapes. And this is, a way in which black levels are improved. And many companies are using this kind of direct backlighting technology. And we see that, for example, some of the highest performance monitors that are out there will have 25,000 zones of local dimming in the backlight, which, becomes quite a lot, and each zone becomes quite small. And so the ability to differentiate between, the OLED set, which is basically purely the difference, how I think about this analogy with OLED is in the OLED, at each window location, you don't have drapes. You basically have an on-off switch for the light. And so you either turn the light off or you turn the light on coming out through that window. There's no backlight there that has to be shuttered in that case. So, all of this is to say that basically LCDs don't have the contrast ratio necessarily unless they use local dimming, full array backlights with local dimming that OLEDs do. So one of the architectures that is being brought to market, and Samsung's made a number of announcements about this recently, is something called QD OLED. And this is a technology whereby we're combining the ability to do very narrow color production by using photostimulated quantum dots with the OLED backplane, which is basically able to turn each pixel individually on and off. And so in this architecture, by making an OLED panel, which is essentially all blue light, and then putting small patches of quantum dots at each subpixel location to convert that blue light into either red or green or allow the blue to come forward, we can create very narrow primaries with very high efficiency and get the benefit of having completely, as many backlight zones or as many independent light zones that can be turned on and off as there are pixels in the set. So this QD OLED technology is also on its way to market, and I expect consumers will be able to buy that in 2021.
And again, it uses this blue emitter stack within it, doesn't it? That's what excites the quantum dots. That's where you get your color from.
That's right. Exactly.
You're putting a date of 2021 onto that. So this must be technology that's capable to come to market quite quickly then, because that's only 2 years away, or less than 2 years away. So I guess what I'm trying to say is what would be the cost implications of doing that for a company like Samsung? And is it going to have the scalability to be a consumer product?
Yeah, so, I play a very small role in a very big production, so I'm kind of like one of those cast members in the chorus that, doesn't even get credits on the play bill. So, all I can tell you about the cost is, things I've read publicly, which is somewhere between $8 and $11 billion is what the reported numbers are that Samsung's going to spend on a new fab, on a new line to make these QD OLED products. And that's pretty much in line with the spending that other companies such as LG and some of the Chinese players have been spending on their OLED fabrication lines. So in terms of, the cost to put the factory in place, it seems pretty similar on the surface. To me, again, I don't have any, special insight into that. As far as the cost of the consumer, I think that this is definitely going to be a very competitive technology to OLED and LCD. And, it's not going to be the sort of, micro LED wall type thing that we've seen, which again, those are fantastic and look beautiful, but, Sony released pricing on that. And, I think that 160-inch TV is something like $500,000. So, that's obviously not really a consumer product. So I think this will definitely be, more targeted towards the consumer space.
Aside from the color purity of quantum dot, what are the other benefits of using that technology over just a regular backlight, for example?
Yeah, so the way in which the color is produced at each subpixel level is, again, we've got white light. Whether that white light is a pure red, green, and blue components, 3 red, green, and blue components, or whether it's made up of a whole bunch of other components like yellows and oranges, et cetera, that come from other types of phosphors which don't emit pure colors. What happens is at the green subpixel level now, for example, we've got a color filter, which is just what you would imagine. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow the green light energy that's in that white light to come through at that green subpixel, and it's going to suppress all the other light energy. So it's going to block out the reds and the blues, and it's going to block out, even to some extent, some of that yellow that's coming through. But the light energy in the backlight, right, we can think of it as, that is a finite amount of photons that exist. Now, if all of those photons are green, red, or blue, then the amount of energy that those color filters actually has to suppress, which is not able to come through to the viewer, is minimized. And so, another way to think about this is the yellow light energy in a backlight never gets out. It never goes forward to see, the viewer. And that, because yellow is not a part of green or red or blue. And so the color filters in each one of those channels always suppress that yellow light energy. But since we don't actually make any yellow light energy in a pure red, green, blue backlight with quantum dots, there's no yellow light energy to suppress, which basically means it's much more efficient because we're not 100% of the photons that we create are in the range where they need to be in order to come forward in the display versus, we've made a lot of in-between colored light, yellow light and orange and turquoise and other colors, which is undesirable in the display, and so that's repressed by the color filters. So you have higher efficiency, you have much purer color quality, as we said, much better color reproduction capabilities. And there's a number of visual effects that happen with this. A really interesting one is something called the Helmholtz-Kohlrausch effect, which was discovered a long time ago by a couple of scientists who were studying the human visual perception system. And so what they found was that saturated primary colors basically appear to the eye to be brighter than they actually are. And so, when people see a quantum dot set, even if we put a meter on the set and it reads, 1,000 nits, and we put a meter on a set that doesn't use quantum dots and it reads 1,000 nits, frequently people think that the color in the or the brightness of the quantum dot set is higher on a perceptual basis. So a lot of these types of perceptual things as well that go along with quantum dot sets. I frequently have people who view a number of the sets we have in our lobby at our office, and they say, "Is that 3D?" And it's not 3D, but it turns out that a number of the visual markers or indicators that our brains use to tell us the depth of an object are not just stereoscopic. So it's not just our two eyes, but it's also all this image processing that goes on in things like the shades of color in the depth of that shading that we see in an image. And again, if you've got pure primaries, there's more differentiation or more delineation between those in the image that you see on the screen versus if you have muddy primaries, those tend to wash together and kind of just get a little more blended, and you lose that sort of sense of depth that's there in the image. So there's a lot of those types of benefits too, which are, you can't write them down on a spec sheet, but they're absolutely real in there. And but the primary ones on the spec sheets are, color volume, color gamut, and what we call color, brightness of the colors, right? So that's kind of the color volume question.
One thing I'm always fascinated with is colour. And we're at, I would say, a point in history when it comes to displays that we've never had it as good, basically, in terms of colour purity and accuracy. But how far can we go with colour? Is there still quite a leap to make when it comes to colour from a display?
Yeah, so there's an interesting, piece of research that was done by a guy named Pointer a number of years ago. And what he did was he went around out in the natural world with a series of instruments, and he tried to actually measure the observable colors of everything that he could. And he measured, tens of thousands of objects that he found in nature. And from this, he created a color space that he called Pointer's Gamut. And so if we look at Pointer's Gamut, what we see is that for the most part, the current color standard, which is used by Hollywood or had been used by Hollywood until maybe the last 2 or 3 years, for the most part, it captures, over 90% of Pointer's Gamut. Now, that's far more than the prior color standards that we had, such as the RGB or sRGB or NTSC color standards. Those only captured about 60% of Pointer's Gamut. So there were lots of objects that we see in our everyday life that were not going to be accurately rendered in terms of their color in our displays when we were using those NTSC standards. But with the new standard that's been in use called DCI-P3, for the most part, we are capturing a large majority of natural objects and natural lighting conditions. The thing is that, since Pointer did his study, a lot has happened. And so we now have all sorts of abilities to create artistic content, which is far beyond Pointer's Gamut. So, for example, when Pointer did his study, we didn't have LEDs. And so artificial lighting and the creation of, content using artificial lighting is very common now. Hollywood uses LED-based illumination for, visual productions. And then obviously we also did not have things like visual effects and animation. And these also create a toolkit for content creators to go and work well beyond what you might see when you walk outside, in the morning and look out your window. And then, and all of that I think has been enhanced with things like Instagram and the filters and all of these types of visual effects. And so there is quite a bit more color space available, because now we can start to think about what is it that the human eye can actually perceive. And so, Pointer's gamut is sort of what he measured as the colors available in the natural world and are reflected light off of various surfaces. But then beyond that, we've got the human visual system. And that is much, much bigger than the DCI P3 color gamut. And the closest standard that we have to approximating what the human visual system can see is called BT 2020 or REC 2020. And that color space is fully 40% larger than the DCI P3 color space. And so there is a lot more color out there that we can create in our display devices that, our eyes will perceive and that will be, kind of stunning, because these displays may be one of the only places where people can actually see these types of things, and because they may not exist in the natural world. And if you don't have a BT20 color oriented or standard display, you won't be able to see these fantastic colors that are going to be used in content creation. And we see Hollywood people just really, really very interested in this because, again, it gives them, if you will, some new palette with which to create. And so I do think that, we're going to see that continue to expand. On a production basis, the largest color gamut sets that we see out there in the world today are something around 85% of the BT 2020 color spec. Which is bigger than the DCI color spec. We see a lot of sets that are 99% or greater than 99% of DCI P3. But as we move forward, I think we'll start to see sets in the 90, 95, 99% of BT 2020. And, that's going to create just a whole new category of visual experience for people.
Just one quick question about quantum dots. So presumably, if you did use them in a self-emitting technology, they wouldn't be subject to things like image retention and screen burn?
Yeah, so a lot of that is ameliorated because the dots, are not going to have that sort of, damage effect. But some of that effect has to go back to the other materials that are used as well. And so, there are these, as I described earlier, there are these other layers in that thin film. In fact, there are many layers. Layers that are, conducting electrons, layers which are donating electrons, layers that are donating holes, etc. And so all of those have to basically be robust and not incur damage over the lifetime of the device. The quantum dots certainly are going to be very robust to that. Another thing about the quantum dots, which is great from a manufacturing perspective as far as the self-emissive type of display is concerned, is that they're very robust to the environmental conditions. And so whereas the OLED materials need to be deposited either under vacuum or inert environment because they're very susceptible to any oxygen being present during the manufacturing process. We routinely are making our displays and our materials in the presence of oxygen. And so quantum dots are far less susceptible to oxidation effects and other types of degradation that we see in oxygen environments. And this basically means that the cost of the production tools can come down dramatically, and we can use, much more low cost and high throughput technologies to make the displays, such as printing, inkjet printing, or transfer printing, versus using some of the techniques that are used to make OLEDs today, which are all evaporative. And you have to build these giant evaporative tools. That's why the OLED factory costs get to be so expensive. I think that we're going to see, we're not going to see the burn-in issues, as I said, at least not as attributable to the quantum dot layer in the stack. And then we're also, going to see some benefit in terms of capital cost and cost to manufacture.
Over the last few years, we've seen a real push with resolution of the displays. And recently I heard you talk at the AK Summit in New York, talking about quantum dot, but also the upping of the resolution going forward. Do you think resolution is where we should be pushing when it comes to displays? Because speaking to a lot of our members and our readers, and obviously we ran a poll today on Twitter, 90% of those on the poll said they're not interested in 8K. And the feedback we're getting from a lot of people is that they would rather have displays with higher bit capacity, better colour reproduction, and pushing towards actually covering P3 properly with colour volume and so on. What's your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think your users are right in that what we should be pushing for is improved visual, experiences, right? And so the one area where I think 8K provides some benefit is not in providing us with higher resolution images so much as it is in providing us with greater ability to kind of grayscale, if you will. Grayscale is not the right word, but basically display at very, very small spatial resolution those increments, very, very fine increments of bit depth that you're talking about. And so, in other words, if you've got a differentiation or delineation between two pixels, one is black and one is white, right? Versus in that same spatial, frame, you have 4 pixels, and you can go from black to a level of gray to another level of gray to white. Then, that's going to appear visually quite different to the user, especially when we start to talk about as those lines run in directions like diagonals, right? And so the diagonal line is one thing that we definitely see with a higher resolution. It looks less like stair steps. So there is some perceptual image quality, I think, that goes along with the higher resolution or higher pixel count, I should say. But, in general, I think that the number one thing that we can do to improve, the visual experience is really being able to produce the specular highlights. These are things like the reflections off of bright surfaces like glass or, chrome. If we could produce those on our displays at the brightness levels that we see when we see those objects in nature, then the visual quality or the perceived reality of the display is so much higher. I've seen prototypes. They're very expensive and, basically water cooled because they use so much energy. But I've seen prototypes that some companies have built where you have that and you're watching the content and you see something like a little lick of flame from a fire. And it looks like it's really burning. I mean, it's really, truly amazing. Now, that is all in that color volume that you mentioned earlier. It's the brightness, but also the brightness at the colors that flame really is. So if we just have a really bright white spot where there's fire, our brains aren't really tricked into believing that that's fire. But if you actually have those really, really super bright yellows and oranges and reds, right, coming off the screen, and again, these would be at brightness levels, even with the best sets that we see out there today, we see a few thousand nits of front of screen brightness. Those specular highlights should be up in the tens of thousands of nits, right? Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that you sit at home and watch your TV at 10,000 nits because you'd be blinded. But, with a general, screen brightness of 500 nits or 300 nits, even if you're in a dark room, having those little specular highlights and those specific areas have the kind of natural level of brightness that our visual system has evolved to see and think about really changes the perception. So, I'm a big believer in this high dynamic range thing, and I think there's a lot more room to go with that. Yeah. Color volume, I think, is a huge one that can, again, bring the perception of these experiences that we have in the displays to be much more lifelike. So yeah, I think that those are really great areas for the industry to move in. Unfortunately, I think the industry gets caught in how do we market that, or how do we tell consumers that that's better. And so saying 4K or 8K or 16K is a way that they can basically, in a very simple marketing message, convey to people this one's new and therefore better. But it's not always the right answer.
I've got to say, I have seen a 10,000 nit display, and Steve has as well. It was CES a couple of years back.
Yeah, it was against a wall, so we don't know what was behind the wall. I'm guessing a massive fridge.
Yeah, probably.
Cool.
Exactly. But saying that, everything that you've just said there, that was the case watching it on a 10,000 nit display. It wasn't blinding, it was so realistic. And there was
some aerial footage of Las Vegas, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Where you were, and it looked like we're looking out a window at Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Right. And, why not? I mean, I think that science fiction writers and Steven Spielberg and many others have shown us a vision of the future where the displays basically are our windows, right? And I was just talking with someone last night, and I was fortunate to be in their home, and they have a beautiful home, and it's on the 46th floor of this building in San Francisco, and we're looking out the window, and the view is just spectacular. But you could have that exact same view in your home in anywhere in the world, right? Regardless of what it was looking like, if you had that display technology and capability that could really make that feel alive like that. And, so that's a very different way to think about our displays. I mean, this guy's apartment was probably $5 million, but, a small flat in some place which has a nice display on it now has the same view as a $5 million place. It's pretty interesting, right, in terms of how it could affect people's lifestyles.
Yeah, we could talk all day about the technology, but we've sadly run out of time on the podcast. But my thanks, Jason, for your time and spending the time with us. And I'm sure you've got stuff to talk about at CES, so perhaps we'll catch up with you again in a few months.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk about it.
Okay, so moving on to movie section, and at least two of us have been at the cinema this week. I wanted to get there more than just the once, actually. I wanted to try and get some use out of my Limitless card. Otherwise, it's useless paying the money every month. But no,
it's a limited card.
It is limited at the minute, and we're going to come on to why I think that towards the end of the podcast. But anyway, I went to the cinema. Kaz went to the cinema. Did you go and see it in IMAX, Kaz, the Joker?
I don't have IMAX.
Because I went to a normal screening and it was shown at 185:1. I've got to say, it looks absolutely beautiful. For something that is so dark and despondent and gritty, and it looks like it was shot in the 70s. It had, the cinematographer has done a fantastic job, especially with the lighting. The lighting is just superb because a lot of the shots are people, are dialogue scenes, are faces and so on, and the way that the use of light and so on, the the sheer drabbiness of everything. It just seeps through everything. I mean, you feel dirty watching it. And this is basically a city that's gone to hell, and it looks very much like New York City in the 70s.
in 1980s.
Yeah. It looks like that, absolutely, because they had the whole city going bankrupt and all the rest of it, and that's very much, again, the type of stylization that they're going for here. You know, the bin men are on strike, so there's rubbish everywhere and bin bags everywhere and all that kind of thing.
What we've come to in a Batman film, the bin men are on strike.
But it shows that the society is definitely in a downward spiral, and they definitely create this them and us. The poor versus the rich, and this is the whole type of the story, and a lot of it is very much kind of what we've gone through for the last few years, with austerity and all that kind of thing. Just, it doesn't look as drabby and dirty in his 1970s, early 80s as this is. But I've got to say I've got to say it looks fantastic. The acting is superb, absolutely scintillating. Far better than Heath Ledger. He is. He owns the character. The supporting cast are absolutely fantastic. The direction is superb. The problem is, I don't know if I enjoyed it. And now, and I want to make a serious point here, because none of these characters are very nice. You're kind of rooting for a really nasty character, and they play it that way. I mean, they show you where he's come from and why he has certain actions and all the rest of it. And it's beautifully shot and all the rest of it. But I came out of that and I was like, did I actually enjoy that? Don't get me wrong, it's a superb piece of cinema. It's a scintillating piece of cinema. And if go and see it, is what I would say. Don't have your preconceptions. Actually, just go and see it and then decide. Because I think for the majority of it, it's superbly done, but I'm not sure if I enjoyed it. I'm not sure if I could sit and watch it again. And some of the violence is some of the most realistic violence I've seen, certainly for a 15. And the way that it's done is pretty shocking, and pretty out there.
Got my interest now.
So, yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I would say I absolutely adored it as a technical piece of cinema, as a film. It's superb. The acting is unbelievably good. At no time are you sitting thinking you're watching a DC Universe movie. It doesn't go there. There's the odd little references here and there, but it doesn't go over the top. It's not like one of these playing along to the fans and you have to have this and you have to have that. None of that in there. There are little things that happen, but they happen because of the motivation within the film, because it is a film, after all, of the Joker. But none of it's done in a way to appease the fans. It's more to tell the story, and this is something we've been banging on about all year. Is, with these films, don't make one with the expectation you're going to make another one, which he hasn't done that here. This is a standalone film. It's not setting up a universe or anything like that. It's got a story to tell, and it tells the story. And I really liked it on that part. Kaz?
So I agree with everything you've said, Phil. But ironically, the bit that I would criticize it for is the thing that I think it is doing, which is it is trying to set up DC Universe Black. So a new label under the DC Movies universe, where they make movies like this, which are a bit darker. And I think that I found any references to the broader Batman story were unnecessary. There's an entire kind of subplot that I would personally not have had in there at all, because I thought it was.
That's interesting, because obviously you're coming from the comic book side of things. You have an interest and so on, whereas I have none of that interest. So actually, coming into that film, I didn't get that feeling. I didn't get a feeling that they were trying to set up a continuation or another universe. So it's interesting that we've got a difference of opinion there.
Yeah, I think maybe it comes from the fact that I'd read up that they were going to set up a universe, and that he was talking about how this could be the first of several, and how it could possibly tie into the Batman trilogy they're planning and so forth. I personally think it stands alone. It should have nothing to do with any other DC films at all. I don't want this Joker ever facing off against any incarnation of Batman, because he's beautifully portrayed as a very, very real person.
Kaz, isn't there some ambiguity? As I say, I haven't seen the film. I've just read around it. But one of the things that was picked up in a review I did read, and I'm hoping this doesn't come and spoil it, but isn't there ambiguity over to whether even this is the Joker that would be the one that Bruce Wayne faces off against?
Yeah, it's brilliantly done that way, Ed, and I didn't really want to touch on it because it could end up being a spoiler. It will end up being a spoiler if I discuss it.
Let's not walk any further, but I think it's interesting to listen to you two talk, even though if I have gone and got a beer in half of it. It obviously, even if there is world building at work, you walked out of it content that it felt like a standalone work, which, as we've said so many times, as you point out, has been an increasingly and frustratingly rare thing in cinema.
Yeah. I mean,
over the last 2-3 years,
all the
DC
movies have to this point tried to do that, and blatantly tried to do that. And in the case of the Suicide Squad, it's an absolute mess because they've tried to do that. This is really refreshing, certainly from my point of view, not being into the comics. I don't know any of the backstory of the comic books because seemingly they have pulled from some of the storylines.
The elements of the killing joke.
Yeah, that's the one. I couldn't remember what it's called. But you see, I've no knowledge of that. So for me, I went in and absorbed it for what it was. I have no intention. I hope they don't make a sequel, like Kazi said, because I think as a standalone piece, it's a superb piece of work. Even if it is a DC film and it's set in that universe, as a standalone film, as a character study and so on, it is superb.
Well, there we go.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head, Phil, which is, I'm sure it will be an interesting take on the Joker origin story. I'm sure it will be an interesting amalgamation of Taxi Driver and the King of Comedy and the Batman DC universe. But ultimately, is it going to be enjoyable?
It's a cracking piece of film, but I was seriously asking myself that when I left the cinema. I don't know about Kaz, but
I live in the world.
Well, I actually had some American Psycho vibes in there, and I quite enjoyed American Psycho. I'm not entirely sure that.
Yeah, but American Psycho is funny, really, really funny.
This is funny in parts as well, though.
Yes, I think this has got some of that dark humour in it, and it's got some clever touches. I wouldn't say it's out and out bleak, and I would happily watch it again. I think Phoenix is. I don't
think it was out and out bleak, but it's not a feel good movie.
No,
I know that.
I think come the end of it, that's why people are worried it's engendering all this anarchist kind of behaviour. Come the end of it, you have to decide whether you're kind of sympathising with a raging psychotic, or whether you're just prepared to crucify him along with everybody else.
I know that no one looks to me for the benchmark of whether a film is any good or not, but obviously within this calendar month, trips to the cinema go from being a 19-mile round trip to 4, and I would have considered, under those circumstances, I would have considered this one. Although I'm not a benchmark, because I would have also probably considered Ad Astra as well, and I think it would have probably bored the arse off me. So no, I don't want to make any claims to clairvoyance here, but it does. I mean, I have to say, Joaquin Phoenix has done some. He's sufficiently compelling in many of the things I've seen him. I'd give him a whirl. Figuratively speaking.
He is that here.
Superb. He is.
It's got comparisons to a couple of Christian Bale roles, ironically, considering it should have comparisons to maybe the Batman roles, but it's got comparisons to The Machinist and American Psycho.
As I understand it, Phoenix lost a bit of weight. He didn't go for Bale levels of weight, Machinist weight loss.
I don't know. It's pretty close. There's a whole lot of ribs there.
Yeah, not a lot else.
This is why this is why Hollywood has been denied to me. I mean, the idea of I could do the Robert De Niro weight gain for Raging Bull thing. I mean, I've been actually making that an art form for some time. But yeah, the catastrophic. I suppose actually, if you paid me 7 figures, I'd probably
you could get a trainer and a dietitian in, you'd be all right.
Get a trainer with little boxes of what you can eat for breakfast, for like mid-morning.
What do you mean? What you can eat? They presume. I just assumed that a trainer turns up with a jiffy bag full of amphetamine and goes, right, this is what you get to take. This is your food for the next 6 weeks. Speed.
And creatine.
and that's it, yeah. Job's a good one. We'll deal with the long-term health problems later on. All good.
Yeah, good stuff. So anyway, from me, it's a definite go and see, or try and see it in one form or another. If you can see it on the big screen, it's well worth it. It looks gorgeous in that it is pretty. It's not pretty, but it looks gorgeous, if you know what I mean. And the lighting and everything, it's worth seeing on the big screen from me. Kaz, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely go and see it. It's a stunning piece of film. Yeah, definitely go and see it. And don't be put off by the fact that it's a superhero movie, because it's really not.
Yeah, I'm using that term loosely in this particular example, but
superhero mythos.
But the other annoying thing here is that there's a lot that we can't say about it, which, when you see the film, it'll make perfect sense as to why we haven't gone down that rabbit hole.
Yes, I think we've skirted around loads of issues. One interesting thing I thought was Scorsese's comments about the Marvel movies, and I wonder what he'd think about this, because
I thought he was involved in this, wasn't he? Initially?
Well, you see, Scorsese said, "I don't watch superhero movies because they're like theme park rides. They're not actually movies or films in any sense of the word. They're just nonsense theme park rides, and so I wouldn't ever watch one." And a lot of people have come out. James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy director, he came out with one of the best replies, which I completely agree with. He said he was there when Last Temptation of Christ came out, Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ, and he was furious that people were criticizing it and crucifying it, ironically,
having not even
when
seen
they hadn't seen it. And he couldn't believe that the same director who had to endure that would now crucify films which he hasn't actually seen, hasn't actually bothered to go through. Because if he did, I think he'd probably appreciate that there's a lot more, certainly in the build-up to Endgame, than there is in the average DC superhero movie. But I found it ironic talking about Joker, because actually Joker should be right up his street. I mean, it's pure Taxi Driver, it's pure King. I suppose so much tribute to those films, to the point of actually having
De Niro's in it.
De Niro, in a flip reversal to his role in King of Comedy. I mean, he's in it, and I can't really understand why Scorsese would write them off like that, other than to maybe get a little bit of bad publicity, good publicity in advance of Irishman, because now everyone's talking about Scorsese. So.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's enough of Joker. Yeah, go and see it. Right, let's move on. Films opening this week. It's another trip to the cinema, I think, Kaz.
Yes. Well, yes. Gemini Man, Ang Lee, 2 lots of Will Smith, trailer.
I wonder if he got 2 paychecks.
Yeah, 2 paychecks.
Is it just me, or is Will Smith so well preserved that the younger version of him doesn't really look any different?
Yeah,
it was like de-aging me. That would take quite a lot of processing power. But Will Smith is unlike Martin Lawrence. Who
I don't know, if we wanted to make you look like a tiny baby, you've got no hair and you're a sort of pink.
But playing a sort of like 20-year-old version of yourself when you're already a super fit, in shape, still got all your hair, 45, seems a bit.
Yeah, he doesn't. I'm not sure he even looks like a younger version of his actual self, and it's pure CG as well, which is interesting. They've gone.
Well, no, he plays
CG foiled it.
See, it's shot at high frame rate, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, it's shot at 60.
It's at 120 frames a second. And funnily enough, watching the trailer at the cinema, I could tell instantly. I knew it was Ang Lee, so I had a suspicion it might be the case, but the motion didn't look right, even though it was being projected at 24p at the cinema, or 48p.
He's gone full nutso on that. That's it. I read that it was 120, but they could only display it at best at 60 in some of these places.
Maybe actually at the cinema if it's being shown at HFR anywhere. I don't know where. But his previous film, The Long Half-Time Walk of Billy Lim, was shot at 120 frames a second, and the 4K disc is at 60. And, it looks like video, obviously.
So I'm not really sure about the whole video game thing. I like Ang Lee, but I don't. Things like that put me off, and I'm not sure the trailer sold me either.
Go and see it.
Yes, it is a give it a shot, but not sure. I have to say, I liked Joe Carnahan's demo reel where he spliced together a bunch of Clint Eastwood movies to make it look like a trailer for what he wanted, because he was signed up to direct Gemini Man.
Oh, right.
And it's like old and young Clint Eastwood movies, and he's done it really well. He's got like Eastwood from Dirty Harry chasing Eastwood from I don't know, In the Line of Fire across a rooftop. And that looked a whole lot more interesting than CG Will Smith chasing real Will Smith. But notwithstanding the way it was shot and the ideas behind it, it is Ang Lee. I do have time for Will Smith. I will give it a shot.
I've just realised why I might not go and see it. Actually, I've just noticed who wrote it. It's Benioff. So Dumb and Dumber are involved, and given what a hash they made of Game of Thrones, I've got no interest in seeing anymore.
Like I say, I have a limitless card that I either have to use or get rid of, so I'll be going along to see this. I'm not sure if it's HFR at my cinema, so it'll be interesting to see how it's
I can't remember when they last did an HFR after The Hobbit. Even the second and third Hobbit films didn't get much of that, did they?
No, they didn't. No.
Feedback was, the general feedback was pretty negative after the first one.
I did see on Twitter a couple had been to a press showing and said it didn't look good at all. So,
but yeah, so there's that. There's Gemini Man. We'll see how that pans out. I think, Steve, maybe the solution to the Game of Thrones thing is just leave 10 minutes before the end, and you'll probably enjoy it a lot more. There's also Abominable. I'm going to say that several times because it doesn't sound
the
right.
review on this one writes itself, doesn't it, really?
A magical Yeti must return to his family. There we go. I can't say that it wouldn't be something that I'm going to watch with the kids, although I'm pretty sure that Smallfoot did this story a year ago, didn't it?
This is what I thought I'd seen this film, but actually it's Smallfoot, wasn't it?
Yeah. Isn't that the same with... Anyway.
Probably.
Maybe this is Bigfoot.
It's one of those typical things where two films about the same thing turn up at the same time.
Yeah, really obscure subjects. Let's make loads of Wyatt Earp films at the same time.
Or films about ants.
Or asteroids.
I was confused for a moment because obviously I was just seeing the credits got Tenzing Norgay, and I was thinking, hang on a second, he must be cracking on a bit. I don't know quite what his acting chops are like, but it's obviously a different Tenzing Norgay to the one who helped
Not the one who
Hitler.
tried Everest, because I'm pretty sure he's dead, isn't he?
I would have thought so, but yeah, it's not him. That's all. So
okay, I'm glad we managed to
clear that up.
Yeah, got on top of that one. Right, discs released this week, Kaz.
Yeah, we got on 4K. We got Maleficent, Godzilla King of Monsters, X-Men Dark Phoenix. Reviews for all of those are up. They're all pretty much demo on all fronts. And Secret Life of Pets 2, which we're also covering this week.
So there's 1 out of 4 that I would possibly spend my own money on there.
Oh,
which one?
Which
I
one?
wouldn't spend
Maleficent, I think is tolerably awful. The rest of them are just shite.
Oh, I love Maleficent.
I do.
A lot of time for Maleficent.
I think Maleficent was actually quite interesting, at least for that kind
I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was quite watchable. If you were, as I say, if I was being held at gunpoint, being demanded to pay money for one of those, it would be that one. I mean, the rest of it.
What, you would actually take your time to make a choice?
Damning it with faint praise there. If someone were to hold me at gunpoint,
exactly.
Film.
I don't buy many films. As you know,
Maleficent was the first Disney, one of the first Disney live action remakes of their, in this case, Sleeping Beauty. But they gave it a different spin.
They did.
Whereas now all they're doing is just doing shot for shot remakes of their animated films. So at least this one had a bit of imagination behind it.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, those films are making billions of dollars, Steve.
Well,
they are. Yeah, they are. But
they're going for the lowest common denominator has never failed. So
I did watch
a lot more money than Maleficent.
Yeah, they're making ridiculous.
But I prefer this kind of story. I mean, it's the only time Disney have come close. It's basically a rape revenge story, and I thought it was the only time Disney have come close to that kind of. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that is the only time Disney have come close to that particular storyline.
So yeah, well.
I watched X-Men Dark Phoenix the weekend, and I'm pretty sure as Jennifer Lawrence's character dies, you can hear her breathing under her breath, thank God it's over.
Is that like a massive spoiler though, Steve? I'm just...
Not really, because they show her dying in the trailer.
Yeah, and it's X-Men. Nobody gives a shit.
I'm just going to say that I didn't know that she died in it when I saw it.
I was amazed she was in it at all because she phoned in the previous film and basically publicly said, I never want to do that again, but I was committed to 3 films. But obviously, they came back with a big suitcase full of cash, and her stipulation was, I'll do it, but I want to be gone within 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
I think
it's an awful film at the end of an awful series of films that peaked at X-Men 2 and has been going downhill ever since. And thank God it's back with the MCU now.
I did not mind it as much. I didn't mind it like
I can't believe they gave the same guy who cocked up the Dark Phoenix story last time.
A second shot. Yeah, it was ridiculous to bring him back. But in comparison,
plus, how old are they supposed to be? Because the first film was set in '62, First Class. So some of those characters are meant to be in their 50s. I mean, James McAvoy is about 8 years younger in this film than the character played by Patrick Stewart is in the first X-Men film. I think Jennifer Lawrence is actually older now in real life than Rebecca Romaine was when she played the part of Mystique in X-Men. It was just the timelines, all that. It's just what it's a mess now. So, good riddance.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you still want to buy the film, good luck to you.
I think I'd heard universally terrible things about it, and when I watched it, I enjoyed bits of it. I thought the beginning was tremendous, and it helped that the score was fantastic, much better than the film deserved. So the entire space section at the beginning was tremendous, and then the nonsense in between was a little bit painful, primarily because I wasn't invested in any of the young characters, and much preferred McAvoy. And
also wondering why these young characters are still so young.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I quite liked the train-based finale. I didn't mind it.
That was a complete reshoot, wasn't it? The finale.
Yes, it was. So
because originally
they were going to go to space, but then it looked a little bit too much like Captain Marvel.
No, they would. I mean, originally it was the Skrulls. They go into space and she flies off at the end. It was Captain Marvel, and they thought, "Oh bloody hell, we're going to have to reshoot this."
Yeah, so they reshot the whole thing. But I mean, I didn't mind it. Like I had problems with Apocalypse. I still have visions of
appalling
Michael Fassbender in a corner of the screen just twiddling some rubbish with his powers. I mean, it just sums up how bad the movie was. So in comparison to that, and with low expectations, I didn't mind this.
Can I just say that? I mean, obviously, this is a terrible thing to say, but she seems to be a lovely person, and no disrespect to her. But in terms of acting, Sophie Turner is a sort of pound shop Karen Gillan.
Yeah,
her American accent does waver quite a bit at times.
Yeah, I got increasingly tired of her in Game of Thrones. I'd still like to think that if she was given something decent to play with, she might be interesting. But
I don't. I'm sorry. I based on quite a lot of evidence now. I'm not 100% sure that's the case.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I just saw her getting more irritating in Game of Thrones, and that's a lot of evidence. And in this, she was. I mean, if you think about it, if they'd done the Dark Phoenix style storyline to a character developed like Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, who, let's face it, in the old movies was a nothing character. If they did it to someone who'd been built up over a few movies to be an interesting character, we'd have actually given a shit.
I think it's sort of telling in so many ways that I find Famke Janssen's Jean Grey to be actually more watchable, and I don't recall her being nominated for
watchable.
Yeah, she's
actually nominated for an Oscar any time recently.
No, so, she was much more watchable in the old movie.
I just love the way that Jennifer Lawrence's fame increased. The amount of time she was prepared to spend in makeup decreased in opposition to it. So by the time she gets to this film, it's like, yeah, I ain't putting that blue makeup on, mate.
Yeah, well, there you go. If you still want to buy this film, I'm sure we've probably got another 20 minutes of dissing it in as if you really...
Well, actually, I've been away for a dump and read all the Sunday papers in the time you've been talking about.
Well, that's fair enough. You know, we aim to please. You know,
and
you're
on Blu-ray, we have... let's get rid of the bad first. So we've got the remake of Rabid, the Cronenberg film.
They remade that?
You said that last time.
I did, didn't I?
You
Yeah,
actually said it with that same intonation. I mean, it's, and we had the same conversation. It's the sister directors. Anyway, they've remade it. There should be a comp up for grabs by the time this podcast gets live.
Obviously.
And Jackie Chan's Crime Story, Van Damme's The Quest. Is that the one with Roger Moore? And Eureka's Sammo Hung trilogy, as well as Arrow's 4-disc limited edition 4K remastered Blu-ray of Old Boy. And the review's up for that.
Is it just Old Boy, or do you get the other two?
You get the other two on two
That's
of the
quite
discs.
good about it.
Okay, and it's a tremendous release. They've done a fantastic job because they've quite clearly primed it for 4K. And I only found out after doing the review that in some other territories they have released it. I think Canada, maybe, in Australia. A couple of territories they have released or announced the 4K Old Boy, and you can see they've properly done the colours ready for that HDR goodness.
It sounds a bit like Kaz is doing a tremendous release over this film. So, yeah.
Streaming releases. We've got Mr. Robot, the final season coming on Amazon. Yeah. That's 7th of October. Get Shorty season 3. Didn't expect a third season, or a second for that matter. That's also looking like the 7th, but it might be 8th by the time it lands on now. Fractured, which is the latest Netflix movie starring someone I can't remember.
Oh, that's
the guy from Avatar.
Sam Worthington.
Sam Worthington, that's it. Guy from Avatar. And El Camino, Breaking Bad movie.
Looking forward to this.
Which has been so heavily trailerized that it appeared before Joker and looked infinitely better than the Harlequin Birds of Prey nonsense trailer that shouldn't have been put before Joker. But yeah, it looks interesting.
Yeah, no.
So that's what we've got coming out on streaming this week.
Right. Okay. Thank God for that.
Are you going to review all of that, Kaz? By the way.
Yeah, I'm going to review all of those. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Right, okay, that's everything that's coming up and everything that Kaz is going to be reviewing. Right, there's only a few months left of the year, so, like I say, I'm trying to justify my Limitless card and keep holding on to it. So, what's coming up at the cinema that's going to be worthwhile seeing between now and the end of the year? Obviously, Gemini Man's out this week, and I think next week there's something else.
Zombieland Double Tap, I'm up for that.
Zombieland, yeah, that looked good in the trailers.
Week after that, Terminator Dark Fate. I'm going to go and see that.
That looks rubbish.
Which actually looks... No, second trailer. Watch the second trailer. It looks better than at first glance.
I thought you didn't watch trailers, Kaz.
I didn't, but come on, for bad films, you've got to watch the trailer. You've got to. If it's a film I want to see, I'm not going to watch the trailer to it. I don't want to know anything about it. But if it's like, why would I watch an Endgame trailer? But if it's a film which, given past form, I should steer clear of, then... yeah, I'm going to watch the hell out of the trailer. Yeah. So I've seen all of them. I don't really wish anyone to watch the second trailer because it gives away loads. But anyone who's not going to see the film based on the first should watch the second trailer. I think it's much more refined and gives you a better taste for the movie, rather than two planes crashing together.
Yeah, Limitless cards. I'll be going anyway. But
then you've got
Sleep.
Doctor Sleep. No,
yeah.
Do you really want? I mean, first of all, Stephen King hates The Shining, as in Kubrick's film. And the book's the sequel to the book. So this is a sequel. This is based on the book, but also ties in some of the film. But do you really want to see a sequel to a Kubrick film not directed by Kubrick?
Well, I don't know. We've had so much Stephen King recently, and the trailer does actually look quite interesting. Ewan McGregor appears to be on a little bit.
Ewan McGregor cannot do an American accent. Why do they keep giving him parts where he's got to do an American accent? His American accent's awful.
I'm going to give it a shot. I'm okay with it. I'm going to give it a shot. It had me at the trailer. Again, I watched the trailer to this because I wasn't going to go for it. The Irishman.
When is that?
November, but it depends whether you're in one of these key locations where you can see it at 6:30 on a Sunday night in an obscure cinema. Given it's end of November, I think so.
And after Doctor Sleep, we've got Midway, which looks a bit. Well, I guess it's the film about the battle. But I thought the effects looked a bit fake in the trailer I saw. They looked better at the cinema than it did on the online trailer. Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh yeah,
I am looking forward to that.
Yeah, they had
Le
a
Mans
long.
66. I don't know whether it's called.
It's Le Mans 66 is
in this
the-
country, and
yeah.
Ford versus Ferrari in the States, isn't it? That same thing.
Yeah,
That looks
because they
good.
don't know
That
what
looks
Le Mans is in the States. That's why.
Bless them.
End of November, Knives Out. That's the new film from Ryan Johnson. So that's a whodunit. So presumably we won't find out who done it. If you like to subvert expectations. I'm going to go and see that just out of curiosity, I think.
Or you get to the end and they just say, "Just let the past die. Just let it go."
And then there'll be another film, a sequel to it, where they completely ignored the fact that film ever took place. Judging by the stuff I read about Rise of Skywalker, basically J.J. Abrams has said, "Yeah, I'm going to ignore The Last Jedi completely and just do what I was going to do anyway." We got Charlie's Angels remake, which actually
I thought we were listing films we were looking forward to.
I know. I'll go and see that. And Jay and Silent Bob reboot, which I'm also looking forward to.
A what reboot?
Jay
Yeah.
and Silent Bob reboot.
Oh yeah, I'm up for that one. Absolutely.
I am too, but Silent Bob isn't the right shape anymore.
Yeah. Well,
I know. Now that's absolutely vital to Kevin Smith not dying, but
He could have
Silent
worn a
Bob
fat
isn't.
suit, couldn't
Well,
he?
if he has,
No,
that's
he
all
doesn't.
right. Oh, well, in that case, that's not right. Silent Bob should be cuddly. It's just the nature of it. That just makes me cross.
Not an
I'm also-
in-shape vegan.
I'm also going to be there for Frozen 2. I'm clearly going to be the only one of us there for Frozen. I'm going to be there for
Yep.
Frozen 2.
absolutely. Oh,
At least
21 Bridges, isn't that the one that's produced by the Russo brothers?
It's been delayed so many times. I'm not really sure. And I think the bridges grew. Pretty sure they started about 7 or 8.
Imagine more.
I'm not even joking.
Well,
Look it up.
how
It
many
wasn't
bridges
called-
are there onto Manhattan Island? I
I
suppose
think
that's
it
the
was.
answer.
I think the at last count it was 17, and then they delayed the film for like 3 months. And now it's 21.
Built 4 more
I reckon-
bridges.
Yeah, I think if they keep it going, it might be like 57 bridges. Oh, I don't know what the sequel's going to be. It's going to be like
By
multiple.
the time they get it out, it'll be Nash Bridges.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not sure about that. I was
Anyway, it
interested
stars-
when it was 17 bridges.
Chadwick Boseman, who plays Black Panther, and it's
Yeah.
produced by the Russo, so it's got some pedigree.
But it's also suffered reshoots and been delayed loads and had a weird title change, which involves 4 bridges.
Okay, so that's the films that are coming up that the people here are interested in going to see. And
Probably Star Wars in December is also people's
yeah,
radar.
I noticed we weren't to go in there.
I'm not
So
that excited about it. But
No,
I'll go and
I couldn't
just to see
care
what
less.
train wreck it's going to turn out to be.
I'll be there, but not interested. Right?
Are you going to be there at midnight?
No, absolutely not.
No, definitely
I
not.
deserve my sleep. There's
All
nothing
yours,
disturbing
Kaz.
me. Yeah, all yours. Right, so wrapping up quickly, TV-wise, it's not coming out to January the 24th. I was expecting it this year, but if they need to delay it to make it better, then all good. Picard, I had no interest in this when I saw the teaser trailer. Having seen the second trailer now, something that Kaz just touched on there, I'm actually more interested in it now because it seems to have a little bit more
Got a lot more of the new generation,
next generation. Yeah. Well, you knew Riker was going to be there.
And
in
7
some-
of 9.
Yeah, 7 or 9. Yeah. So yeah, it's although Data for an android that doesn't age looked rather old.
Didn't Data get blown up in Nemesis anyway?
He did, yes, but he's looking rather old.
But he got better. Yeah, he's looking a bit chubbier around the cheeks than he used to.
And there's
going to the same dietitian as Martin Lawrence.
yeah, and there's a few marks there as well, and lines on the faces and so on. But anyway, it's looking a lot better than the teaser, because the teaser I was like, oh, and especially after Discovery, it was kind of, oh, wow, can they actually keep
It's
this up?
interesting that it's on Amazon because Netflix didn't want to know.
Yeah,
After Discovery, like, we've had enough Star Trek. Thank you very
Well,
much.
you see, the thing that shocked me is that season 3's coming for Discovery.
Yeah, well, they're committed to it, unfortunately. But when they offered them Picard, they're like, yeah, we're not so keen. Yeah, I noticed there's also a trailer just, I think, landed today for Lost in Space 2, which will be available on 24th of December.
Right.
I'm quite looking forward to that.
So
Yeah.
yes,
if your
I heard
Christmas
that
is
was
going
coming out this
terribly
year.
badly,
If you want to
could
binge
just
over Christmas.
binge the new Lost in Space.
This year we've also got Michael Bay going to Netflix.
Oh, yeah, that
Or Six Underground.
Yeah.
which
Is
doesn't
that
do-
the film Michael Bay goes to Netflix? I would actually
everything-
probably watch
you have
that.
to premise it with everything, but it's Ryan Reynolds.
Looked
So
quite good fun in the trailer. I'm up
Yeah.
for that.
So that's coming out this year. We've also got the Watchmen series, which is a proper sequel series, which actually does look like it might be good.
I'm looking forward to his Dark Materials, and War of the Worlds will finally show its head, I think.
Oh yeah, BBC.
I'm up for that.
Yeah. Westworld, is that coming back?
Next year.
Is it next year? Is it? I thought it was end of this year.
Utterly incomprehensible, but yeah, I'll probably give it another go. So.
Jack Ryan, season 2. That's next month, isn't it? I think.
All right. Okay.
Look forward to that.
Ooh.
There you go, Kaz. You've got at least one decent thing that's coming along that you're going to watch on streaming.
in amongst all of the dross.
And at some point, The Deuce will finally come on. What happened to The Deuce?
I have no idea what happened to it. So
Can
Jack
I just say, I did.
Season 2 is November the 1st, and I can't wait for that. Looks proper. It actually looks clear on present danger, despite the fact that at the end of the last season, it felt like they were going to Russia for Hunt for Red October. It looks proper clear and present danger from the trailer, so I can't wait for that.
Can I just say, I didn't realise that Amazon had all 22 seasons of South Park. I
didn't even know there were 22 seasons of South
No.
Has it been going for 22 years?
Yeah.
No, because there's more than...
It has.
It's been going for 20
It's been going for 22 years.
98 it came out, Ed.
Yeah, all right, okay, fine, don't rub it in.
It's been going
But nevertheless, they are all on Amazon. And don't get me wrong, the nature of South Park's topicality means that certain episodes now actually don't make any sense at all. But I rewatched the one with all the heavy metal spin-off bits in it, where they're all getting high on cat urine. What a thing! What an absolutely magnificent 22 minutes of batshit insanity. So, I mean, I know there's all this new stuff turning up, but the thing is that Netflix and Amazon are just locked in a death spiral of bringing your nostalgic content back to you in spades, and it's just all turning up in vasts, and it's turning up at just the right moment where I'm going to be switching from limited internet to unlimited internet. So I'm just going to sear my pants off.
I've got one more thing that's coming out in December is season 4 of The Expanse, which I'm also
Oh yes.
Well, if we're doing just one thing that is coming out towards the tail end of this year, because it comes out at the tail end of every year, MasterChef The Professionals. One of my highlights of the year. I don't care. It's totally different to the other stuff.
That must be on quite soon, isn't it?
It won't be too long, but it's just fabulous television. I just love every second of it. So, and I know that there's a couple of people who post in the comments who feel the same way as me. So yeah, sooner or later, because it finishes just before Christmas. That's always how it works. Right. So we've got a little bit yet. I think it starts in November.
I think it'll probably start just as Bake Off finishes.
Yeah, I know. It always works out perfectly that way. It's brilliant.
It's almost like The Planet.
Yeah.
Well, it's Channel 4 and BBC, but yeah, I agree. Obviously you want to keep your ducks in a row, but Bake Off is a pale shadow of the awesomeness of our Chef the Professionals.
I'll have to take your word for it, Ed.
Phil, did you watch Sound and Fury, incidentally?
I did. What?
What do you reckon?
I have no idea what went on.
No, that's fair enough.
I
mean, you're sort of with it up until the dance number, aren't you?
It was nice and colourful and stuff, and there was a few bits where it showed up some banding, which was useful for testing with the TVs and stuff. But yeah, I was a bit like, what's going on?
Oh, that's fair enough. That seems to be the response of most people who watched it. Have you then listened to the music without the thing?
No, I'm not a sadomasochist.
Oh, I'm absolutely caning that album at the moment. Magnificent.
I'll have another listen, but the one that you did send through was album 5 by
Salt. That's a damn good listen, isn't it?
Oh, fantastic! I've been listening to the back catalogue as well. Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but no, as I say, I would have thought Mustang. I would have thought actually listening to Sturgill Simpson in the car.
Yeah, we're not all rednecks, Ed.
Yeah, you are. I'm sorry, you drive a bright green car with massive stripes on it that makes a noise like a small earthquake. Whether you like it or not, it makes some very definite statements about you, Phil.
And on that bombshell. So that wraps it up for this week. My thanks to Ed Selly.
Can't rely on anyone these days. You have to do everything yourself.
Kaz Harlow.
This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
And Steve Withers.
This city deserves a better class of criminal.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news and videos, plus why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also, head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos of the latest product launches and reviews, and while you're there, feel free to subscribe. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.